All right, welcome. Web 18 to user interface day 3. We're going to be talking about Flexbox pretty much exclusively, but along the way, we will review concepts. So if we go look at the objectives, we're going to be able to describe and understand that Flexbox is in fact a module and not just a single property. This is one of the bigger items of concepts today. Then we're going to demonstrate understanding of a Flex container properties in Flexbox. So we're going to be just showing them in action and the Flex item properties in Flexbox. So I'm going to be using something that I gave to you in class as a pre-reading link, and that is the CSS Tricks Guide to Flexbox. Everybody in the internet, including MDN and everybody, they all reference back to this. This is the de facto documentation of Flexbox. There's a lot of other good resources. For example, Flexbox Froggy is something I asked you to do before class. So just in case you were not understanding how the prepare section worked, the prepare section is you should review each pre-class resource before class. So you should have watched these videos and you should have clicked on these links, read through them, and in the case of Flexbox Froggy, attempted to get through all levels 24 if you could. Super fun. There's other Flexbox things out there, but I think Froggy is my favorite as far as an introduction. So if you're seeing these for the first time going, I did not know that, oh crap, don't worry. That's why we introduce these things. Try it out tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that. Some days don't have links and they just have videos. Do we even have some days that don't have videos or links, and then you got to go right to the training kit materials. So it does fluctuate a little bit. So for example, this visualization, I think this is extremely important for you to see in GIF format so we can actually see the difference. Like even seeing display block is nice to see it across the page. But then when we use display flex, it's really cool to see it happen in like slow motion over and over. I think that just helps solidify things. So make sure you're looking at this after. I think after we talk about Flexbox today, I want you to come back and watch this, and a lot of things will continue to light. Like, oh, that's it. So these things all go into the sum total of what we should be looking at right now. So I'm going to be referencing this document quite a bit today. So first off, let's do a quick review of what we talked about yesterday, a very quick review, and specifically with the box model. So the box model, by the way, does not go away with Flexbox. It's alive and well. So I've just commented back our box in that we were kind of learning off of. So if we come down here and review our notes, remember the innermost section of the box model is content. So it's just decided upon by how big the content is, or if we put in the constraint of a width or a height. That's the innermost section of the box. We then move to padding, and padding is the white space or the negative space between content and border. So if I were to visualize this for you with like a little drawing here, it would be this section right there. That would be our padding on every edge. You just can't see it because it's white space, right? So we're putting in some padding here to see you, or to help you see it. So this portion is content, this portion is padding, and then the red border is quite literally the border. So that's padding. We learned that with padding, that we can actually have a weird thing called box sizing border box. We learned that box sizing border box allows us to constrain or control our padding from the border in. That's why we use border-box. So it uses the box model as a constraint itself, which is really nice because then you don't have to do the extra math when you're trying to add or remove padding based on a design file. So box sizing allowed us. Now, we wrote this crazy monstrosity here, but what this does is it ensures that every element on the page that has a box model uses box sizing border box, including pseudo elements. So that's why we use this fancy little thing here. Okay. Now moving into border, the shorthand is size, 10px, type, solid, color, red. Makes sense. It's very straightforward. You just got to memorize it. Like that's the one. There are a couple things that are like conceptual, and then there's a couple things that are syntactical. This is a syntax thing. You just got to memorize it. And then margin, we kind of just went over it really quickly, but it's because it's the same thing as padding, but it's the outside of border. So it's negative or white space that pushes things around. We also learned something interesting about collapsible borders. So if we had, collapsible margins is what I meant to say, sorry. Oh my gosh, CodePen, please, let me just select that. So if I put two boxes on top of each other, right there, notice that because I've got 30 pixels here, it's collapsing on the border. So these borders are actually collapsing on each other and not giving me 60, they're just giving me 30. So that's kind of an interesting concept that I told you to Google if you wanted to learn more about. But right here, this thing right here, that's 30, and that's 30, and that's 30. And so what's collapsing is there's an extra 30 that should be here by and large for what we wrote. So that's the issue that's going on. The borders the margins are collapsing on each other, only vertically though. Okay, that's a review, a quick review, but I just want to have it in our minds because the box model doesn't, in fact, we'll stay down here when we start talking about basic concepts with Flex. The box model does not go away. It's part of the ecosystem. So even though we're using Flex, guess what? Box model still applies. Okay. Before I move on, are there any questions regarding the box model? Any final questions that have been itching your brain in the questions thread? Dustin says, we use the concept of a container a lot in CodePen to set an overall width for the presentation of content. So Dustin's talking about this right there, that container. I'm unsure of how this concept translates to actual HTML files outside of CodePen. Is it best practice to add a larger container or use elements such as body or HTML for the overall width? Great question. The answer is everything I'm doing in CodePen is what you should be doing inside of VS Code. Because the HTML and body tags, if you think about it, are on every web page of every site. So when you have a 100-page website, you don't want to manipulate something on 100 pages unless you really do, like we do here. We want every web page on the 100 sites to be manipulated. But occasionally, maybe you only want one page to look like a certain way. So that's why we use a nested div as a starting point. So this is actually very common and considered best practice to have a wrapping div presentationally around everything so you can have control of your specificity. So that's the answer, Dustin, is yes, this is actually what I would be coding like in the real world. Okay. Waidu says, do I have to set the overall width and height of the body before I start? No, you don't. However, if you ever want to use height 100%, you do. This is a stupid gotcha. Excuse me. So, it's not worth going into. It's not worth going into. But no, you don't. You don't actually have to do that. We'll talk about more of that weird thing I'm talking about next week with responsive units. Amir says, how do we position elements without using div tags? Can you still manipulate elements without div? Absolutely. So remember, Amir, the reason we even use divs is for presentational markup, for design. So that's why we're using divs. But could we use a section tag? Absolutely. So if I went in here and I change this to a section tag, nothing would change. It's just semantic. So the meaning changed, but the div is all I need. So great question. The answer is it doesn't matter for styling, but it does matter for semantics. Okay, great questions. Let's go forward into Flexbox. So I'm going to be using the same kind of idea where we're playing around with something down here, and then we'll use it up here. I feel like we need a scratch pad. And then by the end of the lesson, we'll just comment it out so it's not in the way. But I want to show you concept down here, reality up here. So conceptually, we need to understand that Flexbox is a module. It's the first time you've seen a CSS module, and probably one of the only modules you'll use for the first while as a developer. I can't think of a lot of modules I'm using besides Flexbox. So what the heck is a module? Why do I keep saying that word? Well, a module implies that there are multiple sub things inside of the main thing. So that means that when we say display flex, a lot of things happen and not just one property. So for example, if we come over here and I come down to the bottom of my CSS and we're manipulating this box, for example, I'm manipulating one property, like background gray. And if I change it to blue, it only impacts that one thing. So that is not a module. That is a single property. However, when I introduce the display type of flex, I am now introducing a whole plethora or a whole bunch of things inside of my div. So I'm going to make a new div, and I'm going to call it flex container, just to be super explicit. No, I don't like the word flex in there. Let's call it parent, so we actually know that it's like got children inside of it. So I'm going to go ahead, comment out our box, and move down here to the bottom and focus on our parent container. All right, so down here, you can't see it yet. So parent container, if I were to say display flex on it, for example, notice that display is just like none or block or inline. Remember all those fun things from yesterday? So we're introducing a new property here that instantiates or builds a module. Okay, so the second that I say display flex on this parent container div up here, I now gain access to all of these properties. Isn't that crazy? Just that one line of code allows me to use all of these properties that we're going to review. So that is the module. That is why Flexbox is a module. And I need you to understand that. And so you understand that to even start using Flexbox, we have to start with that concept there, is that you're actually opening up a whole box of awesome opportunities. So the basics and terminologies look like this. So since Flexbox is a whole module, not a single property, it involves a lot of things like a cross axis and a main axis. Now, hopefully you watched these things in the video, but now we're going to demonstrate these things. So if we come over here to our code, I want you to notice that we've got flex items inside of here. Well, we need to get some flex items inside of our code. So I'm going to go ahead and just say div child item. And I'm just going to say child one. And let's get like 4 children in here. Child 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So you can see down here, we've got these 4 children. Now what I'm going to do, just to demonstrate to you that Flexbox still works with box model, is I'm going to say margin bottom 50 px, just to give myself some breathing room at the bottom of this page. Heck, even 100, just to give me some scroll here. And by the way, if we wanted to see how big this container was, we could just say border 1px solid red, right? And we can see the dang thing. So notice the white spaces from our margin. The content is only as big as our content. So I just want to show you and be very clear, the box model is still being respected in Flexbox. Okay. So in this case, we need to add these items, and these items probably need some kind of style that we could see. So I'm going to say, I could say parent container and child item, right? Like using a very specific selector here so I don't accidentally goof on something else. And so I could use this same class 4 times, not repeating myself. So I'm going to come in here, I'm going to say width, and look again, we've got box model, but notice it's still being respected. So I'm going to say border 1px solid black, just so we can see these 4 children that we've made. Okay. Notice the behavior of the children, though. They're going full screen, right? So that's interesting. Or sorry, the box, the parent, I should say. Okay, now let me turn display flex off and show you the difference. So without display flex, what are the display properties without looking of these items? Child 1, 2, 3, and 4. What is that default display property? Very good. It's block. Why do you know that? How do you know it's block? Very good. Benjamin talks about the traits, the new lines. The divs are block. Cameron just straight up says divs are block, and that's right. Jeff says it takes the whole width. Vanessa says it's because it's vertical, so she can see that it's a new line. All those things are true. Good job. I'm hoping that you're identifying these things and calling them what they are. So every time we do that, every time we call something what it is, it loses its magic, and then our fear goes away. So this is a block, and we're not scared of it. So now what happens is we're going to say display flex. Let's see what happens. Boom. All of them line up. It looks kind of like they did inline block, right? Like they all went next to each other. But something more magical has occurred here. We have gained an axis. So let me show you. We have gained a main axis. So where my arrow is pointing is considered to be the main axis of the Flexbox module. That means if I add a new child, it's going to go towards the direction of the arrow. So if I say child 5, for example, oh man, it refreshes the page every time. So if I say child 5, it's going to go all the way to the right. That makes sense because our main axis is going to push those children all the way. What if I doubled my children in here? Well, look at that. This is an interesting problem. So our main axis is still working, but we're not going down to the next line. It's trying to squish as many children as it possibly can. What if I add 5 more? It's just going to keep trying to squish them in. So this is an interesting thing that's going on. Flexbox tries with all of its math ability in its module to make everything fit. This is a default behavior of what Flexbox tries to do. Now, again, if I turned off Flex, what would happen? We would just get vertical children for days and days and days, right? So to come back to our terminology here so we understand these things better, we've now seen the main axis in action. We've demonstrated the main axis and how it works. Now, the opposite axis is called the cross axis. It's always perpendicularly opposite. So that means if my main axis in this example is going this way, my cross axis will go the opposite perpendicular way, which means it's going to go this way. So this is our cross, and this is our main. Okay? So as long as we understand that, we are set up for success. So those of you that know CSS Grid can actually go up this way and back this way. So that's the biggest difference between CSS Grid and Flexbox. Grid is multi-directional, Flexbox is one-directional. It just goes one way. Okay. Any questions about that concept? The concept of our main axis or cross axis in regards to our Flexbox. Let's see. Zach says Flexbox is implemented in all browsers, and I don't have to link to it in HTML from another source. Exactly, Zach. It's built into the browser. Cameron says the divs are still considered block when using Flexbox, right? Ooh, let's see, Cameron. So if we go in here and we inspect this element, oh, I got to put it back in the shelf here. There we go. So if we come down to this class right here and we look at the display property, what does it say? It says block. See that? Okay, so what does the parent say? It says, put it on display, ABCD, there it is, flex, there it is. So notice what's going on. The parent has display flex. The child is still displaying as block. That should be a hint to us that Flexbox only goes one deep in its nesting. So this is a huge concept that's just been revealed here. is that Flexbox only impacts one level deep inside of its children. So that means child 1 is actually the grandchild of parent container. Like technically speaking, if we were to showcase this nesting with white space, it looks like this. I mean, that's more technically accurate to look at. So parent container is the grandchild, child item is the parent, and child 1 is the child. Isn't that interesting? So that means child 1 is not even being impacted by Flexbox right now. It doesn't even know Flexbox exists. Whereas child item does know it exists and is impacted by it. And of course, parent container is the Flexbox. So what if we wanted to manipulate child 1? We would have to put display flex on child item as well. And that is actually valid code. You can put a Flexbox on a flex item. So we get some flexception going on by doing that. All right. Tyler says, so Flexbox will take specificity over children display properties. Flexbox will manipulate those children properties, Tyler, but specificity still comes into play. So if you have an ID and it's wrecking up a class or something like that, you can get some undesired behavior. So specificity, remember, is more on the selector level, but I like what you're thinking. Flexbox does take precedence and will change things if the specificity is correct. Amir says, if you use inline block, what will happen to the child elements? Try it out, Amir. I want you guys to try things out. Adatunji, I hope I didn't wreck your name. Can't you use reverse to go through the opposite way, though? Yes, you can, my friend. So if we come back over here, I just want to make sure that we're understanding that there's a main axis and a cross axis. Feels like we're doing good there. Seems like there's no questions there. So I want to talk about these little ends and starts, and then we're going to go down to the properties themselves. So notice that we have a main start and we have a main end. Well, that should make more sense now that we've seen the axis in action. So going back to our, get rid of this, going back to our code, if I get this tool out here, okay. So our main start is here and our main end is here. Our cross start is here, our cross end is here. So now we have multiple places that we can end and start. This does matter as we start getting into properties, so that's why I want you to look at it. Okay, now that we're equipped with this basic terminology, we're ready to move forward into the properties. So when I first read this website, I read it kind of opposite of, well, I don't know, I just read it left to right, and it just wrecked my world. So this website is built in a way such that, and they've done a better job with their design. They've actually upgraded their design recently. But container properties are in purple. Child properties are in orange. So make sure that you understand that. If you read this, maybe you looked at this yesterday and you were so confused. I was too the first time I saw it. So make sure you understand that on the left is our properties that are properties for parents, and on the right is properties for children. So we're going to kind of stare at this thing on the left here and see what we can make of it. Okay, so the first property of Flexbox is display flex. Now notice something interesting though, there is an inline flex. An inline flex would work nicely inside of a paragraph, for example, if you wanted to control the flow of maybe some stuff inside of a P tag or using image tags. So inline flex does have a place, but I would say it's way more rare to see inline flex compared to display flex in the wild. I'm seeing this a lot more and seeing this a lot less. So there you go, display flex. We've already done that. So we've done that to get this kind of behavior. Let's move forward into the flex direction. So as was referenced before, we can actually reverse the direction. So notice the arrow's direction. This is where we can actually change the main axis. This is a big idea here. So I want you to pay attention. Main axis means of the total direction of the source flow. So what that means is our first child will actually be the beginning of where that main axis starts. So what I'm going to do to make this a little bit easier to see is get rid of all of our extra fluff for a second. We'll bring it back in because we will need it. I'm going to go ahead and move this div to the top of the page while we're working, and then we'll just delete it when we're, or we'll move it to the bottom when we're done, just so we don't have to go about that stupid page refresh every 5 seconds. There we go. Okay, so in this case, we have child 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way to 5, right? In fact, I'm going to get rid of, well, we'll just keep it there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this property here. So whenever I'm learning something new, I like to copy and paste it down. So we have our parent container, and we come through here, and we can start looking at what can our parent container do. Well, I'm going to copy and paste this down. We have our flex direction row. And that's our default value. So I'm going to say flex direction row. Notice that everything looks great. Now I'm going to try row reverse. And this is where it gets really interesting. So child 1 is actually the first child on the right side. That's because if you look at the little diagram here for reverse row, the start of the main axis goes from right to left. So child 5 is now over here, child 1 is over here. That is interesting. So we've actually completely changed where everything will flow now. So if I introduced a new div, if I said child 6, for example, we'll see that it gets added to the end of the block and not to the front because we reversed the order. So that's cool. How often am I using that? Very few times in my life, but it's still nice to have. Now here's one I have used a lot, column. So column ironically looks like we're back to the old display block, but there's something different here. We can actually control the main axis and the cross axis in a different way. So for example, our main axis is now going this way, but our cross axis is now going that way. So now we can start controlling where these boxes flow, and this is going to be really fun later. So hold on to that thought. But for now, column is exactly what you think, and then column reverse is probably what you thought as well. You just put the child on the bottom, and the row reverses. Okay, so what's the default? Well, it's row, and we're going to stick with row. When it's a default value, you actually don't have to explicitly say it. It just automatically is. That's why we call it default. Just want to call that out just in case it's your first time seeing it. I'll keep it here just to keep our property in place. All right, our next property is flex wrap. Now flex wrap is really interesting because the default value is actually no wrap. And that kind of threw me through a loop at first. But we've already seen that in action. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment all these things back in. So we get our million childs again, 15 childs, not million. So now with flex wrap in place, I can actually see no wrap in action, right? It's not wrapping, it's trying to put everything in place. Now watch what happens when I move to the next property, wrap. Woohoo, okay, now we're getting somewhere. So wrap respects the box model values of the children elements and simply wraps to the next line. That's pretty cool and very handy because more often than not, you actually want to wrap to the next line. So the thing I don't like about no wrap is that it messes with your dimensions, right? It kills 100 and 100. And I mean, height's still being respected, but width is not being respected. So that's where wrap or no wrap is kind of a but. So make sure that if you need to wrap to the next line, you use flex wrap, wrap. And then of course, wrap reverse is just a reversed version of the wrap coming from the other main axis. How often am I using the reverse? I don't use reverse very much. Those are things that just, usually I'm using the main tenets of what we're doing. But occasionally you'll have a design or you'll have something that calls for something that a reverse would make more sense. But usually you're going to be doing the normal default values. Actually, that's not true. No wrap is the default value of flex wrap, and almost every time I'm writing that line of code. So interesting concept there. Okay, before I move on to any new concepts, let's kind of see how this works inside of our international airport example. For example, we have our fly with us and plan your flight section. So if we go to fly with us, oh yeah, it's minimized here. Let's go to fly with us. There it is. Now I want you to look at the div structure because now the div structure matters even more, right? Because we have a parent-child relationship happening. So you can see we've got our H2, we've got a P tag, and another P tag. So we've got fly with us, lorem ipsum dolor, all that stuff, plan your flight. So what we have here is we've got two big divs, or section tags, I should say. So if you look at this architecturally, we've got a good case for display flex. Now, where would you put display flex in this scenario? What div would you want to put it on? Mario says main content. I tend to agree with you, Mario. So in this case, main content would be the parent and the two children would be section. So that's why. I want to make sure you understand why I would do that. So we've got some conversion stuff to do though, because top content and bottom content, remember from our example, they are going in there and they can actually mess with our display properties. So if we come in here and we say parent container, or sorry, I'm lost. I got to scroll up here. And this box is going to be way in the way. So let me get rid of that. Get rid of that. And minimize that. Okay, sweet. So if we come up to our actual example here and we find our main content div class, notice that we don't have a style for it yet, but these display inline blocks need to go away. So I'm going to delete it. I don't need vertical align top because it doesn't work anymore. And now I've got my column, right? Well, let's see how nice it is with Flexbox. So I'm going to come in here and say display flex on the parent. Oh, that was pretty nice, wasn't it? I mean, it just works. And because the default display of flex, or the default of wrap is no wrap, well, guess what? I don't have to worry about freaking math anymore. So I can come in here and say 5%, and it's not going to wrap to the next thing because Flexbox does the freaking math for you. Yes! So you don't have to worry about being 100% anymore if you don't want to be. I think that's awesome. So that was nice. So in this case, now you can see why you're going to love being a developer, because Flexbox just works so much easier in real life scenarios like this. So what did we do? We deleted multiple properties and added one, and changed some margin to make it look, better or worse or whatever we want. We can change this so much easier now. And let's say we go crazy, like 26%. Flexbox still tries to do what we want, even if we're stupid. So we come in here and we do 6%. I think 5% looked really good for our gutters. Whoa, 5%. So hopefully your mind just went like, this is amazing, because it is amazing. All right, at this amazing juncture, let's take a 5-minute break. When we come back, we will continue to find more amazing, fun things. All right, break time is over. Come on back. I reviewed all the questions thread, and Sean and Ben were answering questions, and I agree with all their answers, so I don't need to review them. They all look good. So if you got a yes or a no or whatever on your answer, I verified everything. Looks great. So coming back to our code here and looking at the next concept that we're going to cover. So just wrapping in and of itself solves so many problems. Just this one property. So flex wrap is so good. Let's scroll down. Flex flow. This is just a shorthand property. I'm not too high on it. It's just a way to save writing flex direction and flex wrap. So I'm not even going to muddle up our brains with anything. Like, don't worry about this. It's in there, but it's just shorthand. I'm not losing sleep over it, neither should you. Justify content, however, losing sleep over it. This thing's awesome. So if I go to justify content, notice what's happening inside of these boxes. I've got my purple boxes, so this is my container, if you recall. But look what's happening to the children. They're getting moved around in an amazing way with all these different abilities. So flex start, flex end, center. Notice what's happening here. So let's go see how this works. Grab all the properties, jump into our code here, throw it in as a comment, just so we have it to reference it. I just want you to pay attention that we've only added flex properties to one div this whole time. So cool. So we come up here, we got our flex wrap. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually get rid of, or comment out, I should say, the majority of our children again, just for demonstration purposes. We'll bring them back in later. So, and in fact, I don't think I even want the fifth one. Let's just keep it here so we can really see the separation. So across the main axis is justify content. When you hear the word justify, I need you to think main axis. So little note here, justify main axis. Putting that in our code, in our channel right now. That is a big deal. The opposite is cross. So cross, again, is the cross axis. So anytime you hear a line, it's going to equate to cross axis. That was a lot harder than I thought to type. So between the two of justify and align, I want you to know that those words never goof. They never mix up. They're always associated with those axes, which is so nice. You don't have to guess. So everything that we're doing is going to be riding along that main axis. All right, here we go. So I'm going to type in justify content because that's the property name. And then the value is going to be one of these values up here. So it's going to be flex start, flex end, whatever. So if you recall, flex start was the beginning of the model. So let's go back up here really quick now that we've seen the word again. And if you remember this diagram, start, see that start right there? This is the flex containing starting area. So that's why they call it flex start. So let's come down back to where we were so we don't lose our spot. Okay, we'll come back over here. And now you can see, well, yeah, it does work. Yep, that's the default. It's always on the start. But guess what we can do with end? I want you to pay attention to child 1 and child 4's position. I want you to watch that while I do this. Here we go, flex end. Bump. Child 4 is at the end of the spectrum now, or the end of the main axis, and child 1 is on the left. Notice that all 4 children just shuffled over. This is not the same experience as the row reverse. Okay, make sure that you understand. Row reverse was actually changing the directional of the main axis. Flex end is just moving something along the axis. So this is really nice if you don't want to change the order of things. Okay, so flex end is glorious in its approach here because it gives us the ability to flex across the side here. All right, let's look at another one. We can center things now just by saying center. Yay! No more margin, auto, zero, all that crap. It's all going away. Justify content center. It's beautiful. All right, space between, besides being one of Dave Matthews Band's best songs, it's also an amazing property. So space between gives us equidistant space between child 1, 2, 3, and 4. So notice how this space is all equal, okay? Because the next one I'm going to show you does not have that same kind of equality. So watch the distance between those boxes closely. Space around provides equidistance around in the form of a padding bubble. So I'm going to show this to you. So you can see I've got a space here. Well, guess what? These spaces are equivalent right there. So this is equivalent to this space. So that's what it means by space around. So then this space is also equivalent. This space is also equivalent. This space is also, you get the idea. So I want you to think about space around as providing some equivalent space around each item. It's now that you've seen it, hopefully with these boxes, it's very obvious that it's very different than space between. Because space between is equivalent between, around is little bubbles of equal space around. Okay. Now let's go to space evenly. Space evenly provides even spaces between with not like equal bubbles like we did. So here, I'll make it elongated here. These are all equivalent in their width. Does that make sense? But it also provides a buffer on the left and right. So in this case, you can see equal, 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 equal. They're all equal across this spot. So space evenly provides equivalent distance between each item. So that is the difference. Now that we know them, let's go back to these little diagrams and you can see it even clearer. So space between is space between. Notice there's no space on the right or left. There's no like gutter or anything. So that's a big difference. Space around provides those little bubbles of space around each item. And I think this is the hardest one to conceptually understand, but hopefully you've seen the diagram that I wrote makes sense. And then space evenly is what you probably thought all of them were, which is just even space between each item. So those are the three big differences. Let's see how they work inside of real code scenarios though. And we can look no further than our navigation system. It's going to be nice and easy for us to see this stuff in action. So I'm going to go back to our navigation system. And we've got a header, we got an H1, and we got a nav. Okay, where do we put our Flex container? Where is our display Flex property going to be applied? Header, good job, everybody. Hopefully you're seeing this stuff and it's just like, okay, yep, I see how this works. It's a parent-child relationship. And it's not as crazy as I thought. And guess what? We get rid of that good old friend inline block. We don't need it anymore. Our A tags, our nav doesn't need inline block anymore. So we're going back to just one property here. So I'm going to come in here and say display flex. So there we go. Now we get them next to each other, but we have this new problem. We've got this navigation system sitting over here, and we've got international airport sitting over here. And there's this space between them, and we don't know exactly what it is. So guess what? We can say justify content space between, and it will always guarantee that there will be an equidistant space between them, no matter how little or how much I write. So for example, if I come into my HTML here, and I change international airport and just get rid of airport, notice that nothing gets messed up. Everything will just continue to grow or shrink according to how much space between is available. So if I threw another international in here, you can see it's going to stop and say, look, you can't go that far. There are limitations to how far we can go. This is extremely valuable. Oh my gosh, my voice is going crazy today. This is extremely valuable when we're going across bigger distances. For example, going into like your project and going into, what is it? Great Idea web page, giving that space between your logo and your navigation system is super, super nice. All right, so in this case, our navigation is still got some issues though, because if we look at our code here, we'll look at our nav. Remember, we've got that margin top going on it. So we don't need that margin anymore. And there we go. So that margin was there because we didn't have the right spacing before. So we come into our navigation system, remove the margin, and bada boom. Now we've got space between. So let me take off Flex and so we can see what it looks like again. So that's what it looked like before Flex. And then we had to do all that stuff. We had to use margin. We had to use inline block. We had to use inline block on multiple items. And now all we did was say display Flex. And of course, let's see what justify content did for us. Doesn't seem like a lot here, but it's only because I've made a mini web page here. But in reality, the web page that you're usually going to be building is 1,000. And so if we go to 1,000, let's see how this actually helps us more. So then I come over here. I'm using a small one just because CodePen has a tiny window. But in reality, your website's going to look like this. And so if I don't have justified content and I comment it out, you can see how that's super annoying, right? Because then you'd have to try to guess how much margin you need to push that navigation over there. Well, guess what? No guessing. You just go justify content, space between, and it gives you a nice, perfect space. So I do apologize for the tiny window in which we have to work, but it is the nature of the beast. So that's why I did the things I did here. So hopefully that big example shows you why it's so important to use space between. Okay. That is a real life example of space between and how justify content works. More often than not, you're going to be centering content. You're going to be separating content out. For example, in our A tags here, we could actually manipulate everything to be justify content. But sometimes you just don't need to. So for example, we have margin left of 20px, right? That does the job. Like, you don't need to Flexbox everything. I think that's something that I wish somebody would have told me when I first started learning. Is I saw these new technologies and I was like, I must use them on all the things. And I think that's a great thing to learn, but it's not a great thing in practicality. So make sure that if all you have to type is margin left to get the job done, then do it. You don't need to go in. So if I took margin left out, by the way, I then said, okay, on my nav, I need to display Flex. Okay, now I've got to give myself a width. 400 px. Okay, cool. And now I've got to do justify content, space around. Okay, now it looks good. See how much work I had to do? Now I have to guess like 300, 200, so it doesn't mess up with my international airport. You get the gist of why I'm saying. Sometimes just one little property is the key, and sometimes you do need all this monstrosity. But for now, we don't need it. So I want to show you a non-example. Don't use Flexbox for everything. Sometimes just a simple little margin left does the job, and you don't need to waste all your time thinking about Flexbox. And then other times, this navigation was totally a good use case of Flexbox because of the space between property. So you will find those nuances as you continue to program. They'll just start to reveal themselves as you program. But at least you don't have to use inline block anymore for layout, and that's awesome. Okay. Let's see. Looks like all the questions are being answered nicely. I'm not seeing anything. Chad says, are we essentially just manipulating white space? Yeah, I think so. That's essentially what we're doing by using the justify content on the main axis. So make sure you say that, Chad, that you understand it's on the main axis. I appreciate that comment. Okay, so if we come back here, we've learned justify content. We've learned all the fun configurations we can mess with. We are prepared to move on to the next concept, which is align items. So we've been using everything on the justify axis. Now we're going to jump over to the cross axis because we're using that keyword align. So this is our keyword. And there is no scenario ever in Flexbox where align accidentally works on the main axis. Nope, it's always the cross. So you can see here that we can actually manipulate these things. And this right here, this center, is the best thing in the known universe for Flexbox. Being able to vertically align things. Oh my gosh, you guys, you have no idea how nice that is. So if we come into our boxes here, I do have to make my box a little bit bigger so we can showcase the difference. So I'm going to come in here and say height 400px just to give ourselves a bigger box to work with. So we even have a cross axis to work on, because if we don't, it's not going to move very far. So there is one gotcha. Usually when you're using the cross axis, it's a lot more space that you're using. Okay. So I'm going to come over here, drop in our comment. So we have reference. And talk about align items. So in this case, align items, stretch is the default. Now stretch is kind of a silly thing. It's like, what? So if we got rid of height, we would see stretch in action. So there, that's stretching. And you might be like, wait a second, wouldn't it stretch naturally on its own? Let's see. In this case, because we have no height set and we're justifying content, you can see that it naturally does that, because remember, align items default value is stretch. So usually we're using constraints so we don't stretch all the way across a page. So stretch is interesting. Like, when would you use it? Well, it's always on, so you're always using it if you're using Flexbox, and it'll show itself. And so that's the only time I've never really like set something to stretch on purpose. But I have done the following. So I've done flex start before, and it looks kind of like the default value, but stretch really is. And then we say flex end, and then you'll see all the boxes jump. And for the best trick of all time, center. Oh my gosh. You guys have no idea. You have no idea how many years I've toiled in the dark without center. It's just the best thing ever for vertically aligning things. Like, good luck vertically aligning anything before Flexbox. It was awful. There were ways to do it, but they were so hacky. Okay, and then baseline is an interesting thing here. Baseline is going off of the text. So in order to showcase this, it's kind of weird, but it's always fun. So we'll come in here, we'll grab our child item, and what we'll do is we'll grab child item 1, and then we'll just say child 1. Like, we'll have a specific class in this case. So I'm going to say child 1. Okay, so I want you to watch what happens when I change the padding top to child 1's text. See that? So the baseline, I'm missing an E. I was like, nothing moved. So watch what happens when I put the E in there. All of the other children tried to align with the matching text. So this is a crazy property. One of the craziest properties in all of Flexbox. I think the only one crazier is order. But this one is top of the list of being crazy for Flex containers. And what it does is it follows the bottom portion of whatever the text is of all the common text between all pieces. So in this case, you can see that changes. Now, what if I added it to like child 4? Well, it's going to try to find the bottommost thing again. So if I come over here and I say child 4, and I say 150, you can see what happens. It tries to make sure all the text always aligns no matter what. Isn't that crazy? That's pretty crazy. So what are the use cases for something like this? Well, usually it's in a navigation system like this. When you want all your text items to line up no matter what when it comes to where they are in the cross axis. That's the only time I've ever seen it used. But that doesn't mean that I am the source of all truth and knowledge when it comes to Flexbox. So in this case, don't worry about it, except that you know that it lines up with the bottom portion of a text. But I wouldn't, again, this is one you don't lose sleep on. Okay, and that actually, I think that ends the align items section. So align items, basically center is the biggest one you're going to use, and occasionally flex end. Those are the two that I'm using the most. Stretch, baseline, and flex start, not so much, but occasionally. All right, the last portion of all of our containers. the last property, I should say, of our module for containers. So we've made it to the last one. It's called align content. Line content is tricky. It has basically a precursor to being able to use it, a prerequisite, I should say. This property has no effect when there is only one line of flex items. What? That's crazy. So let's grab the properties and see how this works. Okay, so you can see I've got one line, right? So I'm going to get rid of my align items. I'm just going to get rid of commented out so that we know that align's not being manipulated with. I'm going to use align content. So first off, align is the keyword telling us that we're on the cross axis. So we know that at least vertically, that's where we are. And so if we come into align content and I use flex end. So in this case, it's saying all these children are going down to be at the bottom. However, if I have one line that's not wrapping, so let me bring in all these guys. Like this. Now that they're wrapping, it's going to work all, like the way it should. Let me give it a bigger height so it's like a little bit easier to see. So what it does is it jams everything together. So what if I got rid of align content? What would it look like? It would look like that. What if I said align items flex end? It would look like that. See how they're not moving very much? Okay. Now I want you to notice the difference between content and end. It squishes everything together. You see that? See how they're all really smashed together? So it's aligning all the content together. So if you ever need something like that, and you can see in the diagram how it works, it basically smashes things together and still respects box model. So it still respects margin. All of the things I've showed you still respect margin and padding, by the way. But in this case, it tries to put them in the huddled up at the top of the page or huddled down at the bottom of the page or huddled together in the center. So this is kind of an interesting concept where it's very different than align items. Align items does not group things together like this. See the difference? Align items keeps the separation, so this white space. And then align content smashes them together. That's the only difference, but you've got to have multiple lines of flex items for it to work properly. So let's see how the rest of these properties look. So center. So if you want to put them all in the center, for example, makes sense. Space around gives equidistant space around, which is nice if you want to have a format that's equal. Space between is exactly what you think. Equidistant space between with no padding on the edges. And stretch is the default value again, but it just shows the default, like you're not going to see anything if you have styles set on your children. And that's it. That is align content. So I want you to think in terms of, do I need to align a bunch of things? Align content. Do I need to align a single thing or one big thing? Align items. Or I'll put a little comment here so we can get the difference here. Align one flex row. Not a question mark. Align one flex row. And then this one would be align multiple flex rows. And that is how it should be understood. Okay. So I've shown you everything that a flex container can do. Like, that's it. We've reached the end of the module. That's pretty cool. Congratulations. That's a lot. Now we can dive into the children. But before that, first off, I want to answer questions. And I want to show you something when we start using column, because column wrecks your brain when you start doing these things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment these out really quick. Hit save. And you can see I've got my align items. Let me get everything kind of back to what I would consider normal. So watch what happens when I change the flex direction to column. Okay. what's going on here is now our main axis is going this way, right? So let me get this out here. Our main axis is going this way, and our cross axis is going this way. So that is just a mind flip. So if I come over here and I now change things on my align items, watch what happens when I center things. See, it follows the cross axis arrow. So be careful when you use column. And if you're using row, make sure you understand where your main axis is pointing. It's pretty simple once you get it, but getting there can be difficult. So understand that this flex direction has a big impact on you when you start using all the other properties. So you might have disregarded it at first, like, oh yeah, row, it makes sense. But it's totally different experience when you start using column. Okay, so just be warned, be careful. Okay. All right, let me answer any questions we have in thread. Tracy says, can you specify the number of boxes per row? For example, if you have 9 boxes in your container, can you specify 3 boxes per row? Not here, but in grid you can. So in CSS grid, you can specify where exactly you want boxes. In Flexbox, it just goes off of one direction and just adds boxes as it goes. So you could control it with classes, but there's no Flexbox ability innate. So that's where Flexbox is actually limited. Can that work with pictures and text? Yes, if it's an inline. Oh, you're saying with baseline? Let's go see what baseline says, if it's text or images or inline elements. It's up here. Sorry for the scroll. Okay, here we go. Or no, it's a line. Why did I stop there? Items are aligned such as their baselines align. It's very not specific. So it seems like if there's anything that's inside the item, their baselines align. So you should probably try that yourself, see what the images will look like. Really good question. When using justified content and align items in the same element, is there a preferred order? No. So in this case, you could jumble all this stuff. I could put display flex at the bottom of the page as far as in the selector, and everything will still work. CSS does not work in a way that it procedurally goes through every line. It just doesn't. It reads everything and then compiles it after. So this order does not matter at all. CSS has never had that requirement. If you work at a company, sometimes they will have a style guide that says, you know, do it alphabetical or put all your box model properties at the top, or, you know, but usually that's just a pipe dream of forcing people to do that, because there's just so many properties, you know, over an 8,000 line piece of code. What you'll be exposed to next week, we're going to be building a portfolio piece together where you're going to take somebody else's code and make it your own. And you will see very quickly how crazy CSS can get with even just a one-page website. So in this case, to each their own, and it's up to the big boss. Let's see. Would align items content ever be used together? Nope. It's one or the other. Cameron says, if you turn off wrap, align content won't work. If you turn off wrap, align content, yeah, it won't work. It needs wrap turned on, because that was one of the prerequisites, right? So if there's only one line of flex items, then wrap will not allow it. You have to have multiple lines. So good question. The answer is it must be wrapped as a prereq. But guys, don't freak out about align content. It's not something. It's like a cool tool to pull out once in a while, you know. But align items is center is your hammer. This is like your bandsaw or something. Like, don't worry about. Use your hammer. Don't worry about your saw so much. Okay. Calling them X and Y axis will screw up your understanding. Yes, don't do that, Amir. Call them main and cross. What should happen when you use baseline with column? Nothing happened when I did it. So with column, it's going to try to line up whatever text. So if something is not lined up in text, then the cross axis doesn't change. It would probably change. Yeah, that's a good question. Okay, it's burning my mind. I got to try it. So if we come over here, we say column. I would assume that if we did baseline, that it would be a padding on the left instead of the top. So I come into the child and I say padding left 20 px, and it should bump everything. It didn't. So for me, that's really interesting. Let's try padding top 20 px. Nope. So it's actually not watching the baseline of the item unless the padding goes too far. Let's try 120. Nope. Interesting. Let's try margin. Nope. Well, I'm stumped on that one. And it's because I've probably never used it in my life. So that's a really good one. Baseline on there would have to go off the justify line. And I thought, actually, I'm actually confused why child one doesn't push over the other children. Maybe I have an extra property on. Let's see. Line items baseline. Nope, that makes sense. Yeah, interesting. That's a good problem. I don't know the answer to. That's a really good question. I don't know. Zach says, will baseline work with pictures and text? You'll have to try it. I'm not sure. I haven't done it with text. I've only done it with pictures. Erica says, if you can manipulate your items in both directions with justify plus align, why would you change your flex direction? If you were centering something, you're right, Erica. There's no reason for it. But if you were trying to control which was on the right or the left, that's when you would use flex direction. So flex direction is really about where do you want your children to originate from. It's not about positioning. It's about origination. That, don't worry about that too much. Worry more about the fact that you can go left to right and you can center things and you can space things. Like Flexbox is used for layout. Ben was answering questions. Nicholas says, is justify item a thing? It is not in Flexbox. It is, or a line item or justify item. There are things in CSS Grid. But no, justify item is not a thing in Flexbox. Okay, these are really good questions. I think we've hit our next half-hour mark. So let's take a 5-minute break. When we come back, I have a little Flexbox quiz for you to try out. So 5 minutes, take a break. right, we're coming into the final stretch here, talking about our parent container stuff. I have a little exercise I want you guys to do. It's inside a CodePen here. Oh man, where did I put that though? Now it's like I should have had this ready. And my mic's way over here. Hello again. Don't know why that happened. Okay, let's see here. I had it under is it under training kit tutorials and challenges? Probably is. Let's go see. Object literals. Where did I put you? There's the Flexbox module tutorial. Oh, I think it's in the training kit. Dang it. Take a couple more seconds. If I don't find it, we'll stop. But not sure why I can't see it. What's going on here? Oh, it says popular. I just want to see all of them. Why is it making me do all this crazy stuff, you guys? I don't understand. That's so weird. Oh well. Okay, one last shot here. I had it already this morning. I forgot to put it in the tab. Oh, there it is. Guided demo helpers. There it is. We're getting closer. No. Dang it. No, there it is. Flexbox practice. Yes. Okay. So in this case, I have the URL. Sorry for that. So take this URL. And this is kind of like, this is a mini Flexbox Froggy. It's like a 5-minute adventure. So what I want you to do is come in here, start here, read the instructions. When you display flex, your items will automatically go horizontal. Keep your items this way unless directions specify otherwise. So that means I'm not messing with flex direction here. So I want you to center all the items in container 1. And so go through that and just do that. Center all the items in container 1. Go through for 5 minutes, and I want you to complete the tasks in containers 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay, so follow the instructions I gave here and try to follow what I did. All right, so I want you to do that for 5 minutes. Get some fingers on keyboard and get some practice here yourself. Here we go. Reset, start, do it. All right, time is up. Let's see here. All right, so let's go through this and see how we could have solved it. So in this case, I'm going to fork it first, right? Because you want it to be yours. I'm going to call it practice for Web 18. Save, give to you. All right, so in this case, the first thing said, center all the items in container one. So display flex, and then justify content center would have done it. Sweet. So that was just the first one, a little practice there. All right, keep all the items stacked vertically. Okay, so display flex, and then we want to say flex direction column. Okay, so that was the first problem to solve. Center all items in the container. Okay, so initially you might be thinking justify content center, but it doesn't work, does it? So you have to think about column and say, oh, it's align items. That's how we get that thing. And it's not content to get it to be centered. So that was a little tricky one on purpose. In this case, reverse the order of the items. Okay, so display flex, and then flex direction, row reverse, and then space each item evenly between themselves. Okay, so evenly, that tips me off to justify content space evenly. And there we go. And then the last one, give a container, so display flex first. Okay, give a container a height of 300, okay. Height 300 px. Space each item so that there is equal distance around them. Okay, around them, so justify content space around. And then move the boxes to the bottom of your 300 pixel height. Okay, so I say align items and flex end. And there we go. So this is a solution for the problems. Hopefully having me read it out loud with you, walking through it. Some things were meant to kind of tease you a little bit and go, okay, wait, what's that word he used? In this case, a space around or space between. So that's how you could do it. Hopefully it was a good exercise in just seeing the different powers that you can use with display flex and the justify content. Okay, let's come back to our final piece here, which is items. So the items themselves are part of the styles, I should say, the properties are specifically on each item. So first off, we need to go back into our code here. And I'm just going to go ahead and get, well, I'll just keep them commented out, no big deal. But I need to give a specific class name to each child because of the nature of what we're doing. We're trying to manipulate the children now. That sounds really funny to say out loud. So in this case, parent container has all of the properties that we've been using. Now we're going to be jumping down into the child items individually. So remember, this is not an individual piece. This is all the styles for every child. We need to go into the nitty gritty here for childs 1, 2, and 3, and 4. So I'm going to quickly put this together and save it. So if you're following along, you've got everything. All right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to row just so we can see things in their natural state, like their default state, I should say. We'll keep wrap on, that's fine. Space evenly is fine, just to give us some room. So what I'm going to do now is go through and show you some of the properties we can mess with. For example, order. Order is a brain, this is the hardest thing to comprehend, but once you do, you're like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. But getting there is a little hard. So in this case, by default, flex items are laid out in the source order. So first off, source order is the order in which we wrote our HTML. So the order in which we wrote HTML looks like this. So 1, 2, 3, 4. It's in that order. So that's considered to be source order. As you can see here, they're in order. So now when we come back here, we can actually change that order with CSS. That's crazy. This is really crazy. So the syntax is actually crazy simple. You just type order and then a number. So this is like, what? So it's that simple, but then you do it and your mind explodes. So let's go ahead, type order here, and we'll put in an integer and see what happens. Whoa, child 1 went to the back of the line. What the crap? So if we come back here, notice there's this little comment here that says the default is 0. Oh, okay. Let's start at 0 then. Oh, looks like nothing changed. So what's happening here is if I set everything to 0, we're basically doing the default, right? Just like all the other default values that we've had. And the default is the source order. So 0, all of these are set to 0 right now, just by default. Whether you knew it or not, they are set that way. So now we can come in and change the default order with simple integers. So in this case, 1 is greater than 0, and so it goes to the back of the bus. So in this case, child 1 is now back here, and child 2, 3, these guys are all 0 still. So 1 went over here. So why is 1 over here and 0 is over here? How does that make sense? Well, if you think about integers, I'll go ahead and put a little comment inside of our channel here. It usually looks like this: -1, 0, 1, 2, etc. A little math lesson there. So with integers, we can have those negative numbers including 0 and 1 including to infinity, right? So knowing that, and if the default's 0, that means the source order is 0. All of them are always operating on that. So if you look at that little line of numbers that I just wrote, look where number 1 is in relation to 0. It's on the right side of 0. So that means logically, -1 would be on the left side of 0. So that means child 1, if it was set to -1, would go to the front of the order. Okay, fascinating. So what if I took child 3? So child 3 is kind of in the middle of everything. And I said, child 3, you are now -1 in your positioning. Well, based on the numbers that we have there, -1 is indeed in front of 0. And you can see now child 3 is at the front. That's pretty freaking crazy. So what we've done is we've actually used CSS to control where things lie in the order of their source. Whew, that's cool. That's really cool. Why is this important? Well, it's because sometimes designers and stakeholders and marketers and developers will change their mind in the middle of something really, really important. So for example, I've seen this many, many times where people will come in and say, here's the design file, and then you spend a month working on it. You're about to release it, and the designer comes back and they're like, I'm so sorry. We've been talking about this. We want to reverse the order over here. And by the way, we only want to do it on mobile devices. You're just like, what the crap? And so then you have to go in there, and only on mobile devices do you need to change the order. And pretty soon you're going down this heavy JavaScript solution because at that time Flex didn't exist. It was awful. Well, now what we can do is we can use order inside of Flexbox to change the source order when those things come down the pipe. So yes, it's a very specific use case. Usually you should be writing your code in such a way that you don't need to use order. But if you ever do need to use it for that explicit reason, it's a godsend. It's amazing. So this is really, really nice. Just to give you a quick example without going deep into media queries, I will show you that exact use case. So max width, we'll do 400 just so we can see it change. We will then say parent child 1, and then we'll go in here and say -1, or no, -1. We'll get rid of this so it's all the same. And we're going to give this thing a background color so we can see it better. Okay, so there's our gray box. So now what we're going to do is at 400 pixels and below, we're going to change the source order. So I'm going to come in here and boom. See how it changed? That's crazy. So now what we've done is we've actually changed the source order of where this child gets kicked into. Let's do like 500 so we see it faster. There it is. That's pretty freaking cool. that you can do that with just CSS and no JavaScript. So if that doesn't blow your mind, I don't know what does. That's pretty cool. Don't worry about that. I'll keep it in there just in case you think it's fun. But in this case, that is the only use case I've really seen it in a professional setting that I've used. But order is fun to mess around with in other places just to make changes like that. So wow, that's a crazy property. I think that to me is the craziest property of all properties in Flexbox. All right, Flex Grow. I kind of skip over this in the past. I just want to address it one time here. You don't need to use it unless you're using a layout that literally is like squishy. It's like very elastic, and very few layouts are built that way, but there are components that are built that way. So let's talk about it. Flex Grow defines the ability for a flex item, so remember an individual orange piece in this diagram, to grow if necessary. So here's the interesting thing. If necessary, it accepts a unitless value. So we're not putting in pixels or anything, we're just putting in a value. That serves as a proportion. It dictates what amount of the available space inside the flex container the item should take up. If all flex items have flex grow set to 1, the remaining space in the container will be distributed equally to all children. If one of the children has a value of 2, the remaining space would take up twice as much space. So then inside this case, they're like, look, we're going to set up a flex grow. Negative numbers are invalid, by the way. So in this example up here, they've got 3 children that are all taking up 1 equidistant space. So if we come back to our example and we say, okay, remember what the property is, flex grow. So we come in here and we say flex grow 1. And that's the default value. Notice what it does. It overwrites our width and height that we put in here. So it's another reason why I don't like using it very much, because it kills constraints. But it says, look, take up as much space as you possibly can, still respecting the box model of everything else. So the box model for these children are still 100 and 100. But this one, we overwrote it with flex grow, and now it's trying to take up all available white space possible. This is cool if you need it. If you need something like this, that like if you need one really flexible div and everything else needs to be rigid. Now, what if we introduce another one with flex grow? Well, it just equalizes the space for how much is available and then gives it to the other div. And then, of course, if we do the same thing with 3, we start getting a totally equal box based on white space. So it's a white space equidistance game. So that's why I say, don't worry about it right now. I'm not going to spend a lot of, that's as much time as I want to spend on it. It's cool. I'll keep one in, but I don't want you freaking out about it. It's not something you're going to use today. Flex shrink defines the ability for an item to shrink if necessary. So it's the opposite of the grow. It'll try to shrink into spaces. Flex basis, I don't even want to talk about it. It's just, don't worry about it right now. Flex is the shorthand. So I hate that there's even a property called flex. Just to me, it's confusing. But it's a shorthand of all the things that we just talked about with flex grow. So basis, shrink, all this stuff, it's just shorthand. And I find it annoying that there's a property named flex. And then we have align self. And this one actually is really important. So align self allows us to individually pick out an element instead of grabbing all of them. And so this one is worth talking about. And by the way, is our last property, because that's it. So if we come in here and we grab, let's put it above child 1, for example. And because we have flex grow, let's see how this thing works. So we'll say align self. And if we do flex end, for example, you can see that it stays within its container, which is nice. We can say center. We can say baseline. All the things that you can see there. And of course, that's not going to change. Stretch is the default. Auto. You won't really see the difference between stretch and auto if there's a height set. So these things are all for each individual item. So I could come in here and you can see already how laborious it is to style each individual element, but it's also good to see it. So we'll say flex end for you. We'll say center for you. We'll say we'll keep you at flex start. And baseline won't really have an impact. We'll just try to find its next closest element. So we make that more fun and say center. But you can see how you can individually grab these. Now notice what axis we're on though. Align means we're on which axis right now? When I say align, you think what? Cross, that's right. So if I change the direction, so if I come over here to the parent and I goof with the original direction, like I say column, let's see what happens. Everything looks crazy, right? Because now we're using a different direction. So be careful. If you're using row or row reverse, it changes everything. So those concepts that seemed really simple at the start get really bonkers at the end if you don't stay on the main axis. So make sure you're paying attention and you're building off of the main axis. Otherwise, yes, it gets very messy and scary. So this one little property that seemed kind of harmless at the beginning is like, holy crap, never touch that after you're done. Okay, so how can we use these things in our project? Well, so this kind of stuff that I showed you is all fundamentally sound and good. We've already demonstrated how we could use justified content display flex. We've demonstrated how we can use just display flex by itself without having to worry about anything. We could go down here and mess around with this book a flight button. So let's go do that really quick. So if we come down to book a flight, where are you, book a flight? I think you're in the bottom section. Make this a little bit bigger. The section, main footer. Where is that dang button? It should be in here. What am I not seeing? Plan your flight. Oh, maybe it's in the top content. I forgot. There it is. Okay. So in this case, here's book a flight. Let's put a class on it. Book flight button. So at least we know we can grab it if we need to. And I'm going to go ahead and comment out this stuff up here. And you can use it later. I'm going to comment it and put it at the bottom of the page because the theoretical stuff's great, but I really want you guys to focus on using it in a project. And that's why you're here. So I'm going to hit save. All the stuff there is at the bottom of the page just got uncommented, so don't worry. But let's focus on this. So with book a button, our flight, this gets really interesting. So let's say that I didn't want to book a flight at the bottom left anymore. I wanted it to be between these two divs. Well, sometimes you just need to reorder your HTML. Because in this case, we've got an H2, we've got a P tag, and then the button. So do you see how trying to do display flex on top content would be futile? Because book a flight is limited to this portion right here. It's not something that we want to do. So it's okay to move HTML. Like, that's part of the lesson I wanted to show you today, is oftentimes the first choice is your HTML structure and CSS second. So don't ever think that you're limited and you can't touch your HTML. So in this case, when I move my button, it just doesn't fit, right? I couldn't center it here if I wanted to. So the next question is, where could I center it? So let me make these sections smaller so we can see. So we've got main content, but main content's already got a lot of work it's doing. We've already displayed flex here. And footer is the footer. So honestly, we could put it in a new div or just put the button by itself. So here's our button right there. So the problem with putting the button by itself is, what is the button's flex container if we were to have one? Well, we'd have to look at the big container here, which happens to be container. Okay, we don't want to do that either. So now this is where presentational markup is going to be our best friend, because we can simply add another div if we wanted to. Now, okay, let's be real for a second. All I got to do with button is margin auto that thing, right? So if I come over here, I grab book flight button. Let me show you. I want to talk about box model again and just never ever throw it under the bus. So let's say up here we've got our button. Got to make sure it's a class, right? So dot. And remember, buttons default as inline dash block. So if I say margin 0 auto, let's see what's going on here. Did I get this thing in here? Book flight button. Book flight button. I wonder if the display inline block doesn't like that. So maybe if I have to say display block, let's see. Yeah, so interesting concept there. So because the button is displaying as inline block, it doesn't respect margin auto on the left and right. That's pretty interesting. Let's see the top and bottom, give it some space, and there we go. So book a flight could be on its own without having to worry about that. And then we come down here in 20px just so it's not like weird proportions. So this would be a better choice than trying to Flexbox it. But let me show you what it would look like if we were to Flexbox it. Because I want to show you like this is better, but you could do this. So we could come in here and say div, button, container, because now we've got a block level element going across the whole page. And then we could nest the button inside of that block level container. See how that works? So let me get rid of this stuff here. And then what am I doing? Well, I've got to go to the parent, right? And not the button itself. So button, container. Let's put a border so you guys can see what it looks like. Do you see what I mean? Like that's our container. It's going across the whole page. Well, now it's a no-brainer if we wanted to display flex and then justify content center, right? Because now that goes across the page. So which one was easier? This one was way easier to be able to say display block, margin, and then throw in a shorthand version of margin that's centering with auto. So I just want to make sure that you understand that as much as we can use Flexbox, it's not always the best decision. However, this is the big grain of salt for the day. If you don't know things that you don't know, don't try to code something and think, I know there's a better way, and then you lose an hour trying to like spin your wheels trying to get that button to center. That would be such a waste of time. So if you only know how to center things with Flexbox, just do it with Flexbox for now, and then maybe refactor it later when you're feeling more confident and you've got more knowledge. Don't think that you have to code it the perfect way the first time. That was a big folly of mine as a new developer. I was like, oh, this book says the best way. I got to do it the best way every time. Then pretty soon you start using a hammer for everything. Everything looks like a nail. In reality, there's a screw or there's a window, and you're smashing the window with your hammer because you just don't need to. This would be a case where I'm smashing the window. I opened up a whole new div just to center the button. But guess what? It got done. It's not pretty. It's not what I would actually want to see, but it works. And so I want you to understand that this is valid code while you're developing and learning as a new student. But I want to call these things out so you don't do them on your own. And you can simply go, all right, you know what? I don't need this. I just need this. So I think part of being getting knowledge of Flexbox is restraint and being like, when do I actually need it? And usually it's not as much as you think. But you do need to know as much of the properties as you can, like we did today. Okay. So what does your project look like? Well, you've got a new page to design and develop. Not design, but develop, I should say. I don't know. I think of code as design as well. So if we come in here to UI3, go to the project section, and we open up I have to scroll up a project here. You can see we've got UI3 Flexbox. If you're not reading this README file, shame on you. You've got to start reading the README files. Read every line because we didn't goof around. We want you to read every line. Like, please do that. So I've got two objectives for you today. One is a homepage refactor. So now that you've done an inline block layout, I want you to go replace anything that you used inline block for with Flexbox. Then with the services page build, I want you to introduce a new page based on a design file I'm giving you. So here it is. New page. Now you might be overwhelmed by this when you first see it because you're like, what the crap? This new page has got so many things on it. But think about what's really going on. In CSS and HTML, usually you build one thing, one box, and then you can repeat it n amount of times and just change the title. So this isn't as crazy as you think. It's really just a header, a box, and a footer. So don't be overwhelmed by how much is on the page. Remember, you can copy and paste things of your own code, okay? So one thing we haven't really talked about in great detail that I want to address in the last 5 minutes here is how to link between two pages. Because you need to be able to click on the services link and then go to the services page. How do you get back to the home page? Well, you can click the Great Idea logo. So how's that going to work? Well, inside of hypertext markup language, we have the HT hypertext. Remember that for the A tag? So we talked about this on Monday, but I want to talk about how you link in a local file. So in a local file, meaning a file that belongs to the same folder structure, instead of going out and typing https / and then a URL to wherever you go, you're simply going to name the file. So you're going to find that services.html exists. And that's it. It's that simple. You just type in the name of the file in the A tag, and it just works. And that's it. So that's why I'm not stressing too bad about you guys figuring that out. So being able to type in the name of the file in the href value is all you need to accomplish your goal today. Okay? So that is what you'll be doing this afternoon. Any questions on that? Amir says, hey, I'm sorry. Your last example made me completely confused when to use Flexbox or not. That's okay, Amir. I understand that the first time seeing these things, you want the professor or the instructor or the TA or whoever, your mentor, to tell you, Amir, you should only do it this way. But I would be giving you a huge disservice in your career if I did that, because I would be forcing you to think only one way on how to solve a problem. So what feels like confusion and like, I just want to know one way, my answer is figure it out by trying. Try out all these things. If you can't center anything any other way than Flexbox, that's just great until one day you have an epiphany because you've been programming multiple web pages. So Amir, the challenge is center things however you think you can center them. Don't worry about being confused about 3 different ways to do it. Find out the way that makes sense to you and do it. I think it's a great observation, a good question. Ben says justify, let's see. Is justified content irrelevant if Flex Grow is enabled? So Flex Grow is all about finding white space and consuming it. Justified content is still relevant if you're using the box model. So if you use margin, for example, it'll still respect it. Okay, I think all the other questions were answered by our awesome project managers. If you didn't get any question answered, just rewrite it here. But I'm seeing a lot of people getting answered at, thanks to Ben and all the project managers awesomely answering. Okay, so the question was asked, how about for logo? Do we do the same to link that as well? Yes, so you can put an A tag around the image tag, for example, here. So you'd put an A tag around this, and then you could link back to the home page. Pretty cool, because images are default as inline. They act like text. Mary says, let's see, do images work the same way with Flexbox? I can't seem to get images to move. Yes, it's just images are usually bigger. So you need to constrain your images, but images should work the same way. So for example, let's put this image under we'll do a little test inside the code or in the console here. So this image is inside of a parent. Well, it's not really inside of a parent, so it's kind of a hard example to go off of. The image has to be inside the parent. So make sure, Mary, that you have a good container-child, a good parent-child relationship with your Flexbox. So let me show you what I mean. Let me go grab this image here. I'll just hold image tag. I can jump to a new code pen to show you just so we don't mess around with anything we don't need to. So again, here's our container, yay. Here's our image. And then if I say container, display flex. So first off, let's see how big our container is. That's always a good thing to find out. 1px, solid red. So now we know that there should be something over here that we could flex to with justify content. So I can say justify content, flex end. Oh my gosh, typing all of a sudden. So there you go, Mary. It does work. It's just you've got to make sure that the image is a direct child of the parent and there's no other children fighting it. You know, for example, if I had an H1 in here. The second you add it to the mix, it starts to become part of the justified content portion. So just be careful to make sure that your image is directly inside the parent before you start thinking it's not working. Okay, how are we submitting this project today? So you are submitting that project by watching the Git video. So you're going to be doing a full basic Git flow, including a pull request. What I'm going to do is I'm probably going to, during lunch, I'm going to record a video of that basic Git flow and get it to you, just to make it a little bit easier. So I'll put out a video, put it in training, put it in a channel here, and I'll probably end up putting in training kit, just a general Git flow of how to do the project today. But you'll be submitting that via a pull request, which is all part of the Git videos in your calendar. Anthony, by the way, if you're ever wondering where these magical Git videos come from, they're all coming from the same unit, which is Git for web development. So every one of the videos I'm giving you slowly, they're all just here. So if you want to go through them and start over from the beginning, that's fine too. But I've just been dropping them to you throughout the week as a way so it's not so overwhelming, because Git in one day is ridiculous. Git over a week, very doable. Okay. For the other day when we were supposed to make new pages and link it, wasn't sure if you guys meant purely in CSS. Nope, it's HTML only. So the other day when I was talking about the Sweet Eats Bakery as a stretch goal, I was talking about linking out to another code pen. So like an A tag. You would link out to, for example, you would take the code pen URL and pop it in here as a way to link out to it. That's all. Remember, stretch goals are, I want you guys to understand, earning a 2 means that you accomplished all the minimum viable product, meaning you've hit all of the bullet points that were required in the README. So when you earn a 2, you've knocked out these 2 checkboxes. That's a 2. If you attempt a 3 and get anywhere close to getting something done here, a stretch goal, then you've accomplished a 3. If you couldn't get the main objectives done, but you still attempted them, that is considered a 1. So I just want to make that super clear for yourself. Because sometimes I think you guys grade yourself too harshly. You get the objectives done, you give yourself a 1. That doesn't make sense. If you get the objectives done, you get a 2. If you go into stretch, that's when you get a 3. The expectation of every Lambda School student is that if you get a 2 every day of your life here, over the span of months, that you are ready to be employed. So 2s are the gold standard. 3 is you're pushing yourself above and beyond. So don't think that 3 is like you are expected. Nope. These are not expected. These are extra on purpose. And oftentimes they're not taught to you at all. You're just supposed to push yourself. So please, please don't think that a 3 is where you need to be every day. As much as like my OCD would kick in and I'd be like, I gotta get a 3. I wouldn't kill myself getting a 3. I'd be working on those 2s, and then taking a break, and then reviewing content for the next day. Okay. Could you explain how to turn the project, just to be clear? Yes, I'll be doing a video. Okay. Git for desktop better, I prefer that to command line. If you feel more comfortable in a Git graphical user interface, I will not tell you not to use it. But I will tell you that I want you to know the commands in the terminal and a command line interface. You do need to know what they are, because someday you might not have access to a GUI, whether it be in a code challenge for an interview or a server that you're working on. And if you don't know the commands, you're hosed. So make sure that you know the commands at least by heart for the base. And if you feel good about that, then I give you approval to use a GUI. But I still recommend you get used to the terminal. If you finish one of the stretch goals and not all of them, does it still count as a 3-star? Yes, Chase. Good question. So even just one of these is 3-star. Okay. Great questions, everybody. Okay, let's take a lunch break. I'm going to make a video for you about how to get the project downloaded and started and turned in. I'll go through the whole process, and I'll post that in channel. So by the time you get back from lunch, hopefully you'll see a video there on how to turn the project in. Okay, thanks everybody. I'll see you tomorrow for some Git fun. We're going to do command line interface and Git all 2 hours tomorrow. So you're going to get plenty of Git stuff, and it'll be nice and slow review and prepare us for how to be a Lambda School student for the rest of our time here. So congratulations, you made it through the HTML and CSS fundamentals of this week. We're going to go into Git, and then next week is advanced CSS and preprocessors. Okay, see ya.